Hello and welcome back to Warm Yellow Shade. It's me, Debby. Thanks for dropping in. In today's video, I wanted to just have a little play around with the gouache palette that I put together. So my intention was just to get familiar with my colors again and just explore a little bit of what I can do. Since I'm just getting back into this medium, I'm still a little bit, let's say, anxious about it. And yeah, so this was my breaking the ice, let's say. So I'm using a Pentalic watercolor sketchbook. It's a sketchbook that I've had for years and I never really took to it because of the format. You know, I thought it was like a great little travel notebook, but I don't know, sometimes the size of the paper is a little awkward. But I thought I would give it a shot for this, and I really like it. And also I realize now why you might want to use watercolor paper with gouache. I had been doing a lot of stuff in a multimedia sketchbook, which was fine, but this was so much easier. So if you're starting out with gouache, I would say try to get like a cheap watercolor paper pad. The Canson XL works great for this medium. And I don't think you really need like super high quality gouache paper, watercolor paper when you're doing gouache painting. That's my opinion. I think that with gouache you can totally get away with a cellulose paper and you don't need to spend the money on a cotton paper. And I mean, that is a matter of opinion perhaps, but I'm of that opinion. Anyhow, for the first little study there, I chose a picture of lichen. I think that's how you say it. I'm always unsure. Anyhow, it's that mossy stuff that grows on trees. Well, it's not moss, it's lichen. And I've been really into those kinds of textures, and so I thought I'd do a study. I laid in the first ground colors, and then while that was drying, I moved on to something a little bit more freeform. So I've been mentioning before that a lot of my, let's say, inspiration for gouache comes from animation art, and particularly animation backgrounds. And I've been looking at a lot of Sleeping Beauty background art and story art. That movie was art directed by Eyvind Earle, who is a master in this medium. And if you haven't taken a close look at the backgrounds in Sleeping Beauty, I would definitely recommend that you do. It's such a good example of what you can do with this medium if you can master it. The color is amazing and the textures are amazing. And so because I had been studying them or just looking at them a lot, I realized that some of the marks must have been done with sponge technique. So I went and rummaged through my stuff, and sponges is something that I use for work, but I haven't really used in an illustrative capacity before. I don't really play around with textures enough. And yeah, so I pulled out a few of these different sponges that I had, and I kind of did a stamping effect and tried to get as many different textures as I could out of it. And taking inspiration from what I remembered from that Sleeping Beauty sort of aesthetic, I did a layering of different low growing plants, let's say like wildflowers and things like that. It's very graphic, but it's a lot of fun, and I think I kind of figured a few things out there. What I find cool about gouache and what attracts me to this medium is that you can create a cool kind of cutout effect, and if you use big expanses of color, you can create depth just through blocking color and making the layers very clear and all the lines very graphic, and that's how I think it's the most powerful, and that's what I would like to eventually be able to do myself. After I went back to this lichen study, I realized that I bit off a little bit more than I can chew, and I tend to be a little overambitious, I think, when choosing a reference photo, and I need to narrow things down a little bit more. I mean, I'm very attracted to the colors in this photograph, but there was a lot of stuff going on, and it was kind of overwhelming, and to get all those details in such a small space was a little bit much, so I sort of gave up on it a little bit, but I did do some color practice, and I think I'll come back to it at some point. The next day, I chose a couple of other lichen photographs, and once again, overly complicated. And so I wasn't feeling it that day, to be honest, and it was a little bit much, but I did get some interesting color variations, let's say. But I think that what I will do is do a drawing of some of these things, or do several drawings of some of these lichens, because they are actually tiny little microcosms of, it's almost like a little landscape in itself, and it's much more complicated than it seems. And I think that although I can see the color spots and I could theoretically make it graphic, I need to understand what I'm looking at, and I tend to understand better if I can draw it out first. So I think I'll do some drawings so I know what I'm dealing with, and then I can tackle this subject again in the future. On this third day, I decided to just let myself go freeform and just play around. So on the last day of my 7-day gouache challenge, I had done a little study of a Studio Ghibli background, and I kind of had that imagery stuck in my head, so I kind of played with a little bit of my memory of that, and also tried to just figure out tonal relationships. So I think that's the trickiest thing with gouache, and also it's something that I struggle with in all my artwork, is like having enough contrast. I tend to either work very lightly or in a mid spectrum, and I have a hard time pushing pushing contrast. So I'm really trying to do that with my gouache study. And my advice would be, if you're playing around with this and have the same problem, that when in doubt, go lighter or go darker. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to tell the tone of gouache because of the drying factor, like it shifts after it dries. And I would just say push the contrast when in doubt. It seems to be more optimal, and you want to try not to have to layer too many layers on. So I laid in like an underwash, and I was working dark to light, going back and forth, figuring out how to do some grass textures, and I was just letting myself explore the medium as I tried to understand how to use it. There are a lot of great artists from the golden age, let's say, that worked in this medium, and it used to be much more widely used as a design tool. So I would do some looking back in art history and get some inspiration from people like I mentioned before, Eyvind Earle, and Charley Harper is a great one. All the Ghibli backgrounds are beautiful, and I think that there's a lot of information in there. It gives you ideas of how the medium works. Now, after doing so many studies, trying to draw on my own, I sometimes get a little bit apprehensive and a little stiff because I've had the guidance of a reference image to work from. I don't know, these few days or this last month or however much time has passed, I'm finding it hard to be imaginative, and doing studies has been my go-to thing, my way to like keep making art and keep practicing, because being creative is a little bit hard right now. So I would recommend that, you know. You can do studies of all kinds of different things, and it doesn't have to be sort of like the normal stuff. So if you're interested in gouache and you're curious as to what is the potential of it, I mean, I'm still getting back into it, so I don't know if I'm a good example of what you can achieve, but I would look back at those artists that were masters of this medium and get some inspiration and see if it's something that speaks to you. So I hope you found this interesting. Leave me a comment in the comment section below if you have any suggestions about other videos you'd like to see. Like and subscribe if you liked what you saw, and I'll see you at the next one. Thanks for dropping in, guys. Bye.